Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to today's tropical weather outlook for August 13th, 2026. Today, we are going to take a look at what is happening in the tropics, in the Atlantic, and the Pacific, as we are watching multiple invests in the Atlantic for potential development, and we are watching a hurricane threat for Hawaii, as hurricane watches are now in effect for the island as Tropical Storm Lala has formed and is ramping up. And we're probably going to spend most of the video on Lala since it is a direct threat to Hawaii. So, with that being said, let's get started. First off, we'll get to the Pacific in a moment, but I do want to briefly mention the Atlantic. We are still monitoring both of our invests here in the MDR, Invest 92L, which chances have come down a little bit today as it is beginning to run out of time, and it's kind of getting pummeled by dry air, and shear will be an increasing risk of it over the next few days. But regardless of whether or not this develops, this will continue to move on off to the west-northwest and probably bring impacts in the form of rainfall and gusty winds for the Caribbean by the time we get to the weekend. And of course, we'll get to the track and all of that in a little bit, but that's just the latest on what the National Hurricane Center has on 92L for now. And then we have 94L, which has also been designated to the east of that, associated with this other wave here in the eastern Atlantic, which models are also becoming a little bit flimsy on, but at least for now it still has a moderate chance of development, so we will still be monitoring both of these waves. In the meantime, we're not going to completely disregard these waves for any chance of tropical development until the National Hurricane Center completely drops them from the bulletin and says no chance is expected whatsoever. So until that happens, we will still be keeping an eye out here on what both of these invests might have to offer. Then what was Tropical Storm Cristobal here, now a remnant low in the northeastern Atlantic, and there will be no concern related to this whatsoever, as it's probably just going to fizzle out and fade from existence. But we do have another named storm that was able to occur in the Atlantic and add to the tally for the season nonetheless. The Eastern Pacific also getting pretty active with formations now. What was 99E, Invest 99E, is now Tropical Storm Hernan, so the Eastern Pacific was also able to get another quick spin-up special, as I like to say, because that is basically what Tropical Storm Hernan is going to be here over the next few days. It's not really going to amount to anything other than just be a name here out in the open Pacific. The main focus, of course, is going to be on Lala, which has formed today at 40 miles per hour, and this was a PTC for the longest time ever. Well, not really the longest time ever, what am I saying? But it was a PTC for about the last day or two now, and it is now formed officially into a named storm, and it is Lala. Yes, you are reading that right. Very interesting and kind of silly name, but certainly will not be a silly situation potentially for the Hawaiian Islands. And let's start in the Pacific right now to see what activity is happening there. And you can see with this satellite frame here, kind of weighted towards the east here, or both of these storms are kind of on the eastern end of the satellite shot, but you can see them nonetheless. Lala in the Central Pacific and Hernan way off to the east here on the satellite shot. Both of them, not really very strong storms right now. Hernan definitely getting very much sheared right now and not looking like a very organized system, but that's probably mainly due to the outflow effects here from Lala, which is not a very particularly strong storm as well just yet, but it is definitely looking better organized here. It was able to consolidate from the massive monsoon gyre low that it was a few days ago, as it was kind of strung out here across the tropical Pacific. And now it has developed a small, concentrated, low-level center. And now it's just a matter of whether it can continue to consolidate further and develop a core so that this could strengthen decently and potentially get near hurricane strength as this approaches the Hawaiian Islands. And I say that because looking at the latest National Hurricane Center forecast track, this is expected to remain a named storm for the next few days, but it will be strengthening enough so that maybe this might make it to hurricane intensity or near hurricane intensity as it approaches the Hawaiian Islands, since there now is a hurricane watch in effect for the Big Island here, at least according to the latest National Hurricane Center update. And I'm pretty sure that we probably will get more watches and warnings here posted for the other islands to the north in the days to come, regardless of whether or not they will be hurricane or tropical storm watches. But more than likely over the next few days here, most of the islands of the Hawaii island chain will get involved with some impacts. But I will say, today compared to yesterday, if you compare the forecast track, we have seen things shift to the south here a little bit. Yesterday, the forecast track entirely encompassed the entire Hawaiian island chain within the cone of uncertainty. So within the white cone here, meaning that the track was almost for certain going to go over someplace in the Hawaiian island chain, whether it was the Big Islands or maybe even it would track to the north and kind of go over some of the smaller islands, although not necessarily smaller in population, because as I mentioned yesterday, Honolulu is in one of these more smaller northern islands, and Honolulu is the capital of Hawaii after all. But the forecast track has shifted to the south today, and maybe we are looking more at a scenario where Lala clips or potentially just stays south of the Big Island. But believe me, impacts more than likely will still be felt here, and I'll show you what those impacts may be in a second. Model track guidance, though, you could definitely see that there was a shift south in the model track guidance today. Almost all of them had, a consolidation of tracks, going right over pretty much all of the islands of Hawaii yesterday, but the models have definitely shifted to the south today. And I did tell you, model shifts are very much still possible, even especially sometimes going out to at least 1 or 2 days out, we could still have significant shifts in the track. And in fact, that's actually happened with one of our invests that we are tracking in the Atlantic, where it was expected to track towards the northwestern Caribbean and potentially north of the Caribbean, but now it's expected to track towards the southern Caribbean. And I'll show you what I'm talking about related to that in a little bit. But my point is, track changes and shifts happen, and they pretty much happen until the storm actually pans out itself. And it looks like today's shifts, once again, confirmed by the National Hurricane Center, and looking at the track guidance here, shifted mainly to the south. So I guess that probably would mean that, we might avoid a direct landfall after all, once again, in Hawaii. And it is kind of hilarious. And I always like to say this, but for some reason, getting direct hits to the island chain of Hawaii here are very rare, especially when they happen in a east to west fashion like Lala is going to happen here. Usually they tend to end up missing to either the south or to the north, but either way, very likely, unless this moves nearly due west at this point, I think impacts directly over the Hawaiian Islands, regardless of whether or not we see a direct landfall, will still be felt. Because remember, a storm is not just a point on a map. It has a wind field, and the wind field will very likely be expansive enough, unless this misses way to the south, that we will still see impacts, at least for the Big Island of Hawaii. And let's show you the models to kind of, show that point here. So here's the GFS. Let's look at the individual models here, because this was the model track guidance. And of course, here's the individual model with the GFS, and we'll look at other models too. For the 12Z run, and let's just take you out and see and show you what it shows here. And you can see it expects Lala to continue to consolidate here over the next few frames. It's probably going to intensify pretty decently, but it'll especially probably start to intensify more once it gets closer to Hawaii, because maybe for the next few days here, it's still going to take a little bit of time to consolidate as well. Because remember, it was a very large, monsoon gyre kind of, or not really a gyre, but it was a very large monsoonal low. So it's still going to have to take a little bit of time to consolidate from that, and maybe in in respect, that too might maybe play a little bit of a luck factor here, or serve as a luck factor for the Hawaiian Islands. But intensification is still going to happen more than likely. And the GFS here on the latest run has Lala passing just to the south of the Big Island, probably as a strong tropical storm to maybe a minimal hurricane here. But impacts are still going to be felt here for the Big Island. So that's what the GFS shows. The European, on the other hand, seemingly shows that this will still clip the Big Island of Hawaii, and does have something very interesting. Probably has to do with the reflection of the fact that there are very large mountains here, especially on the Big Island of Hawaii, and that too will also play a role and help kind of enhance whatever impacts we see, especially when it comes to rainfall for the Hawaiian Islands. But it kind of does something here where the low-level center ends up pretty much kind of reforming on the other side of the Big Island here, I guess due to the low-level center being interfered with by the Big Islands. Definitely a very interesting thing that you see occur, but either way, this definitely looks like a direct threat or direct hit on the Big Island here of Hawaii, according to the Euro. And then obviously from there, it moves on off to the west, and it probably will intensify pretty significantly afterward. Another thing that not really is being talked about, but I guess probably has not as much relevance to Hawaii. But afterward, Lala might actually intensify pretty decently and become a decently long-lived, intense storm as it makes its way on over into the West Pac, and probably produce quite a bit of decent ACE for both the Central and Eastern Pacific and Western Pacific basins here. But luckily, it's probably going to do that, out to sea as it's moving away from Hawaii, and probably not impacting much of anybody beyond that. But taking a look at the impacts, though, as it will be impacting Hawaii here, I want to show you probably the biggest impact, in my opinion, is going to be the rainfall. And take a look at how much rain is being forecasted for Hawaii here, according to the European. And this will definitely be impacted by where it does track. And the European has quite a bit of rainfall, especially for the Big Island here of Hawaii, because, well, it makes it track directly over the island. And even because of that, we still see quite a bit of rainfall as well for the neighboring northern islands. But actually, I will say the amount of rainfall it does show here for the Big Island is quite concerning. Those are some pretty strong values here, potentially suggesting at least a foot, maybe even more, of rainfall for the Big Island. And once again, you have to factor in the amount of, how much that'll more than likely be impacted by just the fact that the terrain is very mountainous, the problems that might cause with mudslides and, flash flooding and river flooding and all that kinds of stuff here. Not a very pretty scenario setting up for Hawaii. And even with the GFS model, which keeps this storm mainly to the south, and we don't see a direct, hit on the Big Island, you still see some pretty hefty rain totals, as much as half a foot, even up to a foot of rain still expected for the island as a whole. But of course, because it takes a more southerly track, it ends up sparing more of the northern islands here. So we will still have to watch and see the variation in the track, because it will impact who and how much of the significant impacts that we do see here. Because if this ends up taking a more southerly track, as you can see here from the GFS, maybe that'll spare Hawaii, and especially including some of the more northern islands from getting, really, really big rain totals. But if this takes more of a European scenario, where we still potentially might see the storm clip, even if it's just barely clipping the southern portion of the Big Island here of Hawaii, that'll probably bring a lot of rainfall for the Big Island, and still some pretty decent rainfall as well for the neighboring islands as well. And the National Hurricane Center, though, right now, probably, reflecting more of the European solution, because I do believe, once again, they still show that the track probably remains just near the Big Island of Hawaii. So because of that, the rainfall forecast is pretty significant. They are expecting anywhere from 16 to 20 inches of rain, and they even say potentially isolated areas of up to 25 inches, so above 2 feet of rainfall, and even stretching into some of the northern islands here, like Maui. They expect up to potentially areas of above 10 inches of rainfall, and if you are to know anything, you would know that those kind of rainfall totals are absolutely not rainfall totals to mess with at all. And I don't know how many times over especially just the last few years alone where we've seen rainfall events, sometimes not even tropical related, in the mainland U.S., where we get rainfall situations of up to a foot to even 2 feet, that catch people off guard and cause lots of problems. And especially Hawaii, climate where it's a very controlled climate, I must say, that Hawaii is in. I mean, they do obviously get stuff like rainfall, but probably not 2 feet of rainfall in a matter of a day or so, like what might happen here with Lala. So the bottom line, what I'm trying to say is, the biggest impact and the most concerning impact, in my opinion, with Lala is going to be the rainfall. And I tend to always say as well, when it comes to these tropical cyclones, what is the biggest impact that we typically see? It is the rainfall. And that is looking like it'll be the case here with Lala. But of course, we will see just how much this evolves, because maybe if the track continues to shift more towards the south, we might hopefully be able to shave off some of these rainfall totals here for the Hawaiian Islands, and maybe we won't get up to 2 feet of rainfall and above, but at least a foot in some areas, I still say is probably almost guaranteed at this point, and that in and of itself is still probably a major threat and a major problem. So we will be keeping a very close eye out here on Lala over the next few days, and do not let yourself get caught off guard by this storm. Do not, anticipate that, maybe if the track is shifting south, that might mean that the impacts won't be as bad. Maybe the wind won't be as bad, especially if you're talking about, for the more northern islands here, we might not get as much issues with the wind, although I still imagine they'll be gusty. But the rainfall is definitely shaping up to be potentially a very big issue. And taking a look at the storm surge as well, the storm surges won't really be as much of an issue for Hawaii, just generally given the setup of the ocean here, and Lala will not be that strong of a storm after all, where storm surge will be the biggest threat. But it is still expected. Most of the coast here of the islands expecting 1 to 2 feet. Maybe the Big Island could see as much as 1 to 3 feet of storm surge, and even that in and of itself is not entirely something to play about. But again, the biggest impact with this storm looking to be the rainfall, and it's definitely going to be a pretty significant rainmaker, which once again will cause problems. So we will be keeping a very close eye out here on Lala over the next few days as it passes through the Hawaiian Islands. And I'm probably going to be posting multiple updates here on YouTube on Lala in the coming days. Maybe I might have another one later tonight, and maybe I might have multiple as well by tomorrow and maybe Saturday too, as Lala makes its approach through the Hawaiian Islands this weekend. So lots to be watching here very closely over the next few days. Moving on to the Atlantic, though, where there's not as much to talk about right now, even though we do have 2 areas of investigation that we are monitoring. Obviously, as I said, Invest 92L and Invest 94L, which you could see here in the MDR, are definitely pretty defined tropical waves and tropical features right now, but they are kind of lagging behind a little bit today. 92L especially producing some decent convection here, but has definitely gotten a little bit less organized today since yesterday, and even with 94L too. And this was a wave here that the models suddenly uptrended on very significantly about 2 days ago, but since they kind of have been lagging behind. So it's honestly possible that both of these waves might not even develop, as crazy as it might say. And I said definitively that at least one of these would. But the MDR right now still struggling from issues with especially lots of dry air out there. In fact, let me show you it, the Saharan air map right now. Take a look at how expansive the dry air shield or the dry air field is, especially throughout pretty much the entirety of the central and northern MDR. And you can see here both of our invests kind of embedded in it, especially here 92L, much more embedded in the dry air than 94L. But even then, you can still see that it is probably affecting it. But these waves are absolutely ingesting this dry air, which is broadening them out, kind of preventing them from really being able to consolidate a lot. And I mean, yes, part of that is due to the nature of the El Nino that we have in the Atlantic right now. We have an extra added amount of dry air, and there's also the wind shear problem too, which both of these waves are definitely going to face as they get further and further west, closer to the Caribbean, especially 92L, which is probably why 92L is even less of a chance now at this point in being able to develop. But climatologically speaking as well, we still see a lot of Saharan air in the MDR once we get to mid-August. August, we generally start seeing the Saharan air out here clear out slowly, but it doesn't happen right away. We still have probably at least a week or two of the Saharan air gradually lifting to the north. And these tropical waves are still kind of spinning up a little bit earlier after all. The climatological ramp up for the peak of the hurricane season doesn't really begin until August 20th, so I guess we still are a little bit ahead of the train there. So it kind of makes sense why the disturbances are struggling right now, although, some people might point it towards El Nino happening here. And again, I'm not saying that isn't the case whatsoever, but Saharan air is definitely probably a big factor here. And taking a look at what the models show here, namely the GFS over the next few days, you can see Invest 92L now pretty much struggles to even close off here. And again, wouldn't shock me in the very least if 92L doesn't even develop at this point. But it's still probably going to track off to the west here and have enough of remnants associated with the wave that there will still be gusty winds and impacts brought to the Caribbean islands here, and probably more so now the central and southern Caribbean rather than the northern Caribbean, although probably the entire Caribbean islands will still receive gusty winds and rainfall, I suppose. And you know what? That's a good thing. You don't have to deal with the threat of potentially tropical cyclone and having to deal with tropical storm watches and warnings and things like that. But you will still get the rainfall. And as I've been saying, those in the Caribbean right now definitely could use and definitely would welcome the rainfall given the drought conditions that are happening there. And of course, that in and of itself has a lot to do with just the general unfavorable atmospheric pattern of the Atlantic right now, which is killing off and really suppressing a lot of these waves by the time they get to the Caribbean. So getting the rainfall here would definitely be beneficial. And then 94L here, you can see the GFS still tries to develop. But even then, if this ends up, being a weak feature, as more than likely it will be, 94L in and up too might also be something we need to watch for, at least for the northern Caribbean, over the next few days. And that in and of itself could also bring more in the way of rainfall as well. But in terms of any significant tropical development over the next week here in the Atlantic, not looking very likely. I mean, definitely maybe not with 92L anymore, maybe with 94L still. But interestingly enough, the GFS is showing yet another aggressive tropical wave coming off probably in about a week's time. So the models honestly are starting to look like they are kind of undergoing this phase of, continuously hopping onto the next tropical wave, which moves off the coast of Africa. And some people online like to call it next wave syndrome, sometimes where the models just keep on hopping onto the next wave and the wave behind on being aggressive and potentially having a chance. But as I've been saying for the last few weeks, as we progress further into August, we're going to continue to get these more aggressive tropical waves to, move out into the eastern Atlantic here naturally as climatology becomes more and more formidable and favorable as we get closer towards the peak of the season. You would think that eventually one of these waves will stick and will break through and develop. And I still think that more than likely that'll happen here over the next few weeks, whether it is 92L that will still try, although I think the chances are going down on that, or 94L, which still has a chance right now, or maybe the wave behind that, or the wave behind that. But I think something is going to happen here in the MDR over the next few weeks, and we will continue to watch the tropics here in the Atlantic, and of course the Pacific as well, as Lala is going to be closing in as we get to the weekend, and probably will bring significant impacts to Hawaii, regardless of whether or not this, maybe goes to the south of the island, unless this shifts way to the south, that it brings all of the rainfall and, wind field with it, and we barely see any impacts to the islands of Hawaii, which would obviously be a good scenario, but I still don't see that regardless, and either way, if you're in the island of Hawaii, you'll be wanting to keep a very close eye out here on Lala over the next few days, as impacts are still, in my opinion, nearly guaranteed. With that being said, though, I'm going to wrap it up for today's video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I would really appreciate if you like, comment, and especially subscribe to the channel, since we will be keeping you updated quite a bit here over the next few days, since we do have a land impact happening and a land impact brewing here with Lala. So if you are interested in that and you want updates for that, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and turn the notification bell as well if you haven't already done so too, so you can get videos the moment I upload them. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. And I hope to see you back here with more tomorrow, or maybe tonight. We'll see.